As a new NBA season approaches, we are reminded that most teams start the season with a sense of optimism about their potential for success, whether it be in the current season or seasons down the line, even if winning a championship isn't necessarily the realistic goal. This optimism can stem from some solid planning, or in some cases, just some wishful thinking from fans. So this got me wondering, when was each franchise at its most objectively optimistic point heading into an NBA season? Now, I got this idea from Hank Schreiber at hoopsanalyst.com, and he said one way to measure this optimism is to simply go through the preseason odds to win a championship. Luckily, SportsOddsHistory has tracked these odds since the 1985 season, so here are the best preseason odds for each franchise during this modern era. In this episode, I will be going over the Eastern Conference, and then I will make a part 2 entailing the West. The 1986 Celtics are in the short conversation of greatest teams in NBA history. Makes sense that they entered 1987 as heavy favorites to win another title. And to their credit, the 87 Celtics are amongst the most resilient in team history. After dealing with injuries and a brutal Eastern Conference gauntlet, the team was able to pull out rough series versus the Bucks and the Pistons before they finally fell short to the Lakers in 6 games in the finals. The Knicks were one of the premier teams of the 1990s, but fell short in the first half of the decade, losing to the Bulls in 1991, 92, and 93. When MJ called it quits ahead of 1994, it seemed that this was New York's chance. New York makes the finals in 1994, but they fell short to Hakeem's Rockets in 7 close games. It was just a few short years ago when the Nets entered the 2022 season employing Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. The team was brimming with top talent, but the experiment was really snake-bitten from the start, though certainly worth a try in retrospect. Drama ensued in a hectic 2022 season as James Harden was traded mid-season and the Nets lost to the Celtics in a round 1 sweep. The 83 Sixers are considered one of the greatest teams ever, and despite being upset by the Nets in '84, the Sixers entered 1985 as title favorites as they brought back the usual suspect of stars in Dr. J, Moses Malone, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks, and Bobby Jones, but they also drafted an undersized power forward out of Auburn by the name of Charles Barkley. The team won 58 games and made it all the way to the conference finals before falling to Bird Celtics. Now, I know you thought we'd see the 2019 Raptors here, right? Well, wrong. We gotta remember, back in 2018-2019, we were still heavily under the trance of the Warriors, so no other team outside of Golden State really got a fair shake with the title odds. The Raptors' actual best odds were heading back into the 2002 season. In 2001, the Raptors were a Game 7 away from the conference finals, and Vince Carter was heading into just his age 25 season. Carter, however, missed 20-plus games in 2002, and the team stumbled to 42 wins and a first-round loss. Not much to note here. The Bulls had just won 72 games and dominated the playoffs, so naturally they were heavy favorites to repeat as champions in 1997, and that's exactly what they did, and without much difficulty, winning 69 games and cruising back to the finals. Now, you could really insert any LeBron-led team here as a guess and be fairly right, but I'm not sure many would have guessed 2015. LeBron had just returned to Cleveland to deliver the title that he had promised to the people of Ohio. On top of that, the league was entering a new era. The Miami Heat were no more, and the Cavs rose from the ashes in the Eastern Conference. The Cavaliers did make the NBA Finals in LeBron's first year back, but they were undermanned with Kyrie and Kevin Love getting hurt, so they fell to the upstart Warriors in 6 games. The Pistons won 63 games and beat the Lakers in the finals in 1989, so what did they do in 1990? They ran it back, 59 wins and another championship. The Pacers were a Game 7 away from upsetting the Bulls in 1998 and were the best team out east heading into the lockout-shortened 1999 season, but they fell to the 8-seeded Knicks in the conference finals, a series that had the controversial and iconic 4-point play by Larry Johnson. The Bucks were unbelievable in 2020, and at one point they were even pacing for 70 wins before they cooled off a little bit and the league underwent a hiatus due to the pandemic. Giannis got hurt and the team lost momentum, losing to the Heat in the bubble. They ran it back in 2021, but this time with Jrue Holiday. They overcame a surreal Nets series in the 2021 second round and then would go on to beat the Suns in the finals. I was not expecting this season for the Wizards and Bullets. Remember, we don't have data going back to the 1970s when Washington was arguably the best team out east that decade. Here in 1987, Vegas gave moderately long odds for a title to a team that had won 39 games in 1986, but then acquired a near-peak Moses Malone. The team did improve in 1987, but they weren't a title contender, and they lost to the Pistons in round 1. Now, 1996 was the theoretical peak of the Penny Shack Magic, says Hank Schreiber from HoopsAnalyst.com. They beat MJ's Bulls in the 1995 playoffs and then made it to the finals against Hakeem's Rockets, a successful season by any measure, especially for an expansion franchise. Vegas, however, still had the Bulls as a slight favorite at plus 350 over Orlando, as Chicago reloaded in the offseason with some big roster moves to complement MJ's return. The Magic did win 60 games in 1996, but they were swept in a rematch versus the Bulls in the conference finals. Understandably, after LeBron, Wade, and Bosh teamed up, Vegas was pretty optimistic on Miami's title chances. After a 9-8 start, the Heat settle in and finish the season on a 49-16 tear, and then beat a really good Celtics and Bulls team en route to the NBA Finals. Well, Dirk and the Mavs spoiled the plan by beating Miami in the finals that season, and the Heat would have to wait a year before claiming the trophy. Heading into 1988, the Celtics were finally starting to show some cracks due to age and health after repeated deep playoff runs. Many people thought the Hawks were there to supplant the Celtics alongside the Pistons, and Atlanta was pretty good in 1988. They won 50 games and were a Game 7 away from knocking off the Celtics and making the conference finals. The Hornets haven't really been playoff contenders in a while, but there was a time in the 1990s when they were perennially in the playoff picture and even had a handful of 50-plus win seasons behind some really good offenses led by Larry Johnson, Glenn Rice, Anthony Mason, and Alonzo Mourning. 1995 was their breakout campaign as they won 50 games, but they drew the Bulls in the first round. The Bulls won the series 3-1, and Alonzo Mourning forced a trade to the Heat just a few months later. And that is part 1 covering the Eastern Conference. Next week, I will cover all of the teams out west by looking at their preseason odds and look at when people were the most objectively optimistic for each of those teams heading into a season. But for this one, let me know what you think. What teams, do you remember the most of? What teams are the most disappointing? What teams lived up to the hype? Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this is Once Upon a Dribble.